Good day. Welcome to another session of Fog Accountancy Tutorials. Today we are going to continue our lesson on cost segregation and estimation, and we are still on the high-low method. We are yet to go into the linear regression method. We are still on the high-low method, and we are looking at the high-low method when there is a change in variable cost. We've already done the basic high-low method. We look at the steps involved in estimating costs using the high-low method. And then we have also looked at the high-low method when there is a change or a step up in fixed cost. And then today we are looking at the same high-low method for cost estimation and segregation and estimation when there is a change in variable cost per unit. And that is what we are going to look at. And so, like I always do, I'm going to use a question to try to explain and make it straightforward because we know the basic principles of the high-low method already. Now, when there is a change in variable cost per unit, usually it's when there is an excess of an activity range. Sometimes, organizations benefit from what we call economies of scale. Okay, the more you produce, the lower the variable cost per unit. And therefore, there are instances where when production exceeds a certain volume of output, the variable cost per unit will reduce by a margin. And in that case, what is going to be done in terms of estimating cost using the high-low method? Remember that you can have 1,000 units produced at a cost of, let's say, $4,000, and then you may have 7,000 units produced at a cost of, let's say, $25,000. Now, if this is your lowest activity level and the highest activity level, now we can use the high-low method to estimate our total fixed cost and also find the variable cost per unit and the cost equation, which can be used to predict other costs in the future. However, if you are told in the question that, let's say, variable cost per unit reduces by 10 cents when activity level exceeds 5,000 units, then of course, what it means is that immediately the output exceeds 5,000, there is a drop of variable cost per unit. Then it means that the variable cost per unit inside the cost of the 7,000 is not the same as the variable cost per unit that was used in estimating the cost of the $4,000. And these are the dynamics that we want to check out. There are instances where the reduction in the variable cost per unit affects all the output, and there are instances where the reduction in variable cost per unit will only affect the excess. When I talk about the excess, I mean that if it exceeds 5,000 and we are talking about 7,000 units, then it means that the reduction affects only the extra 2,000 units, the cost associated with that. And there are instances where once it exceeds the unit, the reduction in variable cost per unit affects every other output that was already produced because of economies of scale. So these are the basics and the dynamics. I'm not going to waste too much time explaining. I want to take a question which will help us understand this straight away. Okay, so let's look at this question together. A company has the following cost at two activity levels. So we have the activity level in units and the total cost in Ghana cedis. Now, at 21,000 units, total cost is 276,000 Ghana cedis. And at 30,000 units, total cost is 327,000 Ghana cedis. Now, let's read. The fixed costs are constant over this range of activity, but variable cost per unit fall by 50 pesos above 24,000 units, but only for units above that level. That is not for all units. Required. Using high-low analysis, calculate the total cost of 28,000 units. All right, so this is a very interesting question that we are going to look at. Now, we are given two activity levels. The first activity level is 21,000 units, and the associated cost for the unit is 276,000 Ghana cedis. And then also we have 30,000 units. So this is in units, and that is in Ghana cedis. And the cost associated with the 30,000 units is 327,000. So obviously, this is the lowest activity level. This is the highest activity level. And these are the total costs associated with the activity levels. Now, this would have been easier to solve if there were no clauses of increase or decrease in variable costs. But here we are told that the total costs are constant over this range of activity level, but variable cost per unit fall by 50 pesos, that is 0.5 Ghana cedis, above 24,000 units, but only for units above that level. So that is not for all. So what it means is that we don't know the variable cost per unit. Okay, it's something that we are now going to find. But we are told that the variable cost per unit will fall by 50 pesos. So there will be a reduction in the unit variable cost by 0.5 Ghana cedi. That is 50 pesos. When activity level exceeds 24,000 units. So these are the dynamics, okay? Once the activity level exceeds or the units exceed 24,000, there will be a reduction in variable cost per unit by 50 pesos. Now, that is not all. We are told also that the reduction of the 50 pesos does not affect the entire units produced. It only affects the excess of 24,000. Once the only extra. Now, we are supposed to use that to predict the total cost of producing 28,000 units. Of course, we need to find the variable cost per unit just as we do for the high-low method. In this case, there was no step up in fixed cost. There is only a change in the variable cost per unit. Now, how are we going to go by this? It's very simple. You see that these two activity levels are in two different domains. The first activity level, which is the lowest level, does not exceed the 24,000 units. So there is no reduction in variable cost per unit at that level. But when we come to the highest activity level of 30,000, 30,000 is exceeding 24,000 by 6,000. And therefore, there is a reduction of 50 pesos on the extra 6,000 units only. You see, I told you that the questions will give you clauses. Okay, in this question, the clause that we have is that the reduction only affects the excess. So you see that once activity level reach 24,000, any extra units produced, that is here 30,000 minus 24,000 means that there are 6,000 units extra. And that means that for the extra 6,000 units, there was a reduction in variable cost per unit of 50 pesos. And that is what we are going to do. And so we need to now do the high-low method. Now, in order to be able to do proper high-low, we need to get the total cost at a position as if there was no reduction in variable cost, so that we can find the original variable cost per unit, and then we can now differentiate to find the variable cost per unit when the output exceeds 24,000. So what we need to do is we need to find the reduction in variable cost per unit of the excess. Now look at what we are going to do. You see that there is an excess of 6,000 units that I just explained. When you multiply that by 50 pesos, which is 0.5 Ghana cedis, you're going to have 3,000 Ghana cedis. Now, this is what it means. It means that the whole total cost that we have at the highest activity level of 30,000 has been reduced by 30,000. By 3,000. Because if not for the reduction in variable cost per unit, total cost should have been this amount plus 3,000. But the 50 pesos reduction in the variable cost per unit has caused a reduction in total cost of 3,000. That is what it means. So what we need to do is that, okay, let us assume there was no reduction. Let us add back the 3,000 to the total cost per unit. Then we can do our high-low method to find the original variable cost without reduction. And once we find that, we can now come back and apply the reduction and then find the variable cost per unit when there is a reduction. This is a simple logic, just as we did for the step up in fixed cost, when we assumed there was no step up before we did the analysis. And so this is what we do. We are going to say that now the highest activity level, so we'll say that the high is 30,000 and the cost associated with the high will be 327,000 plus 3,000. So we add 3,000 to that, it's going to be 330,000. We add the 3,000. We assume that there is no change in variable cost per unit, so we put it back. And then the low is 21,000, and the cost associated in Ghana cedis is 276,000. So let's find the difference between the two so that we can apply our high-low method to find the variable cost per unit. So we have 9,000 units here, and then we have 54,000 Ghana cedis here. All right, so therefore, the variable cost per unit equals to 54,000 Ghana cedis over 9,000 units. And that is going to give us 6 cedis per unit. And so therefore, the variable cost per unit, the original variable cost per unit, this is the true variable cost per unit that has been in existence before the change. And that is 6 cedis per unit. Okay. So now that we have this, then it means that we can now find the variable cost per unit that is applicable when the activity level exceeds 24,000. Now, when the activity level exceeds 24,000, we are told that we have a reduction in variable cost per unit of 50 pesos. Therefore, the change or the new variable cost per unit after 24,000 units is going to be the 6 cedis minus the 50 pesos reduction. And that is going to be 5 cedis, 50 pesos. And so it means that when activity level exceeds 24,000, variable cost per unit to be 5 cedis, 50 pesos. Only for the excess. This question doesn't apply to all the units, remember. Only for the excess. When I'm done, I'll also look at a scenario where it applies to all. Okay. So this is how to get a variable cost per unit. Now, we are not just done. We need to now use this to find our total fixed cost and get the regression equation. Once we have the total fixed cost, we can estimate any units that we want to estimate. So from here, we need to find the total fixed cost here in the production cost. Okay. Now we can find total fixed cost using any of the variable cost per unit. When we want to use the 6 cedis as a variable cost per unit, then we need to put the formula into the lowest activity level where it's 6 cedis. When we want to use 5 cedi 50 pesos, we need to put it here into the highest activity level and its associated cost. But whichever one that you use, you need to get the same total fixed cost. So let us use the first unit, which is 21,000 and 276,000. Now we know that to find your total fixed cost, it is your total cost minus the total variable cost, which is made up of your variable cost per unit times the unit. So it's your quantity times the variable cost per unit. We know this equation already. Okay, so total fixed cost that we are looking for will be equal to, now we are using the lowest activity level. So cost is 276,000 minus the quantity of 21,000 times the variable cost per unit of 6 cedis. Remember that we are using the 6 cedis because of the lower activity level. Now, we need to find our fixed cost. Therefore, our fixed cost will be 276,000 minus 126,000. And that's going to give us a total fixed cost of 150,000 Ghana cedis. So, ladies and gentlemen, our total fixed cost is 150,000 Ghana cedis. So now that we have our total fixed cost, we have the variable cost per unit for units that are below the 24,000. We have the variable cost per unit for the extra units that are above the 24,000 units. We can put this in the linear equation and then we can, or the cost equation, and we can estimate the total cost of any activity level that we want to do. And so I'm going to clean this board and we are going to use this information to estimate the total cost of producing 28,000 units as required by the question. Now we are required to, using the high-low method, to calculate the total cost of 28,000 units. Now, we are going to calculate the total cost of 28,000 units. Remember that 28,000 units is in excess of the 24,000 threshold. And remember also that the change in the variable cost does not affect the entire 28,000. The first 24,000 will be affected by the variable cost of 6 cedis, variable cost per unit of 6 cedis. Then the extra, after 20, when you take 24,000 from 28,000, we have 4,000 extra. So the excess or the extra 4,000 will be applied we apply the new variable cost per unit of 5 cedi 50 pesos. And then we add the total variable cost to the total fixed cost to get the total cost of producing 28,000. So the cost of producing 28,000 units is going to be as follows. Let me put it in a tabular form or a statement form. First of all, we bring our fixed cost, and from the calculation we did, our fixed cost is 150,000. Then the variable cost will be in two parts. We will first have 24,000 multiplying 6 cities. Remember. And then we are also going to have the extra 4,000 because we are dealing with 28,000. The extra 4,000 will be multiplying 5 cities, 50 pesos because of the reduction in variable cost. And so 24,000 by 6 cities is going to give us 144,000. And then 4,000 by 5 cities, 50 pesos is going to give us 22,000. And so our total cost of producing 28,000 units is going to be 316,000 Ghana cedis. Very, very simple to estimate. So you see, once you have two different variable costs per unit and each of them apply to different rates, this is how you go about estimating the cost of producing any units at all. And this is the total cost of estimating the 28,000 units. We have a constant fixed cost which did not step up, but we have changes in our variable cost per unit. I hope this is very understandable. Okay. Now, having understood this, what I want us to do is that we are going to look at another question. There are scenarios or there are circumstances where the change in variable cost per unit will not be given as an absolute figure, like it was given to us as 50 pesos reduction. There are cases where it will be given as a percentage, okay, that when output exceeds this activity level, there is a percentage of this and that change in the variable cost per unit. And so I'm going to look at a question where the change is in a form of a percentage. We'll solve that, and I'm sure we'll be done with this very subtopic under cost segregation and estimation. Okay, so let us look at another question regarding this. A company has the following cost at 3 activity levels. So we have activity and total cost. So we have 20,000 units and the total cost is 300,000 Ghana cedis. We have 25,000 units at a total cost of 320,000 units. And we have 30,000 units at a total cost of 356,000 units. The fixed costs are constant over this range of activity, but there is a 10% reduction in the variable cost per unit above 24,000 units of activity. This reduction applies to all units of activity, not just the additional units above 24,000 units. Required, estimate the expected total cost when the activity level is 22,000 units. Okay, so let me clean the board first. All right, so these are 3 different activity levels. 20,000, 25,000, and 30,000. The good news is that, in questions like this, they will not leave you in the dark, okay? We are told that there is a 10% reduction in variable cost per unit above 24,000. And in the units that we have, the list of units here, we have 2 of them above the 24,000. So let me just list them. We have 20,000 units at a cost of 300,000. We have 25,000 units at a cost of 320,000. And then we have 30,000 units at a cost of 356,000 Ghana cedis. Now, we are told that there is a 10% reduction in excess of 24,000 units. However, this reduction applies to the whole units. So, fortunately, we have 2 of them above the 24,000. 25,000 units is above 24,000 and 30,000 units is also above 30,000. So the 10% reduction has already applied for both of them. So what we need to do now is that we are going to now use the 2 that are above. Okay, the 30,000 as a high, this is in between, okay, but we'll use it as a low in this case. So the high-low, we find the variable cost per unit for these two activity levels. Once we find the variable cost per unit, we know that they are already reduced by 10%. So to get the original variable cost per unit, we need to now find we use a different ratio to find the original, and then we can apply to the lower levels, because we are going to estimate for 22,000, which is also below the 24,000 threshold. So these are the dynamics. So this is even easier than what we did. So we are going to use these two units as high and low to find the variable cost per unit. So just watch. We have the high to be 30,000. Its cost is 356,000 units. Then we have 25,000. In this case, I'm using the in-between as a low, 320,000. So we subtract, and we have 5,000 units as a difference here. And then we have 36,000 units, Ghana cedi, sorry, as a difference. And therefore, the variable cost per unit is 36,000 Ghana cedis over 5,000 units. And that is going to give us 7 cedis 20 pesos per unit. Now, what it means is that this 7 cedi 24 pesos per unit as the variable cost per unit is a variable cost per unit for the two units, which are both above 24,000 units. So therefore, there is already a reduction of 10% in what we have just estimated. So in order to get, so what it means is that, listen, it means that this 7 cedi 20 pesos, which represents the variable cost per unit at these two levels, is just about 90% of the original variable cost, because we assume 100% for the original variable cost per unit, and there has been a reduction of 10%. Therefore, this represents 90%. And so, in order to be able to estimate total cost of any activity level below 24,000, we need to get the original, which is the 100% of it. Now, if you wanted to estimate any cost that is above the 24,000, there is no need to look for the original variable cost per unit. You could have just used the 24,000, the 7 cedi 20 pesos to estimate. But once you are supposed to estimate cost of producing anything below the threshold, then we need to find the 100% or the original variable cost per unit. And how are we going to do that? So let us now find the original variable cost per unit. So to find the variable cost per unit below 24,000 units, then it means that you need to, we are going to use mathematics. If more, let's divide. So it's going to be 100 over 90 times 7 cedi 20 pesos. 100 over 90 times 7 cedi 20 pesos. And then we'll use that to find. Now, if you are confused as to how I came about this, you can just use your old mathematics style, where we will see that 7 cedi 20 pesos maps to 90%. And therefore, we don't know what will map to 100%. But we are looking for the 100%. So we represent it by x. So we can do cross multiplication where 90x will be equal to 720. 720. And therefore, x will be equal to 720 over 90. If you use this method, whatever amount you have is the same that you are going to have here. Okay, so if you are not so sure as to which one should come up or down, you can go by this old mathematics stuff. But yes, 100 over 90 times 720, and that is going to give us 8 cedis. And so we have 8 cedis here as well. Whichever method that you are conversant with should give you the same result. So now that we have 8 cedis, it means that the original variable cost per unit was 8 cedis. And the 10% reduction, 10% of 8 is 0.8. So when you take 0.8 out of 8, you have 7 cedi 20 pesos. So this is correct. So our 90% has now been converted back to 100%. So that means that the original variable cost per unit before the reduction of 10% was 8 Ghana cedis. Okay. So now we have the original variable cost per unit. The next step is to find your fixed cost. As we know that once you have your variable cost per unit, the next step is to find the total fixed cost. Of course, we can use this or that to find the total fixed cost. If you are using this reduced variable cost per unit, then you are using any of the reduced activity levels. If you are using the 8CD, you are using the original. So let us use the original to find the variable cost or the total fixed cost. So to find your total fixed cost, we know that fixed cost equals to total cost minus the variable cost, total variable cost, yes. But the total variable cost is given as the quantity or unit times the variable cost per unit. So this is how we go by the fixed cost equation. So fixed cost that we are looking for now will be equal to, we are using the first one. So it will be 300,000 minus quantity of 20,000 units times variable cost per unit of 8 cedis. So our fixed cost will be 300,000 Ghana cedis minus 160,000 Ghana cedis. And so fixed cost will now be 140,000 Ghana cedis. This is how you estimate your fixed cost. So having been able to estimate the fixed cost, bingo, we can now straight away find our estimations. Now the question says we should find the cost, total cost when the activity level is 22,000 units. Okay, so to find your total cost, so let me use the tabular way or the representation way. So cost estimation for 22,000 units. We begin with our fixed cost. So the fixed cost is 140,000. Now, in this case, the variable cost, we are looking at 22,000 units, which is below the threshold where the activity level or the variable cost per unit will increase. And here, we don't have two different variable costs per unit at this level. And so we're just going to use the 8 cedis because 22,000 will not be reduced in terms of variable cost per unit. So the variable cost, and we know total cost is fixed cost plus variable cost. So variable cost is going to be 22,000 units times 8 cedis, which is going to be 176,000 Ghana cedis. And therefore, our total cost of producing 22,000 units is going to be 316,000 Ghana cedis. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is how to estimate your cost when there is a percentage change in the variable cost per unit. I'm sure that this has been very understandable for you, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you as well. Find new examples, try them on your own, and then let's see how you have improved. Remember to subscribe to this channel if it is your first time. Share this video and let others also have a benefit. And until we meet again for another video or lesson, it's bye for now. Thank you.